Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I shouted her name so loudly my throat burned. The sound echoed through the living room, bouncing off the walls and into my ears. In response, I heard her laughter, faint, breathy, almost a giggle, coming from behind the closed bedroom door. It chilled my blood more than if she'd spat curses at me. Laughter. In a moment like this, I stepped forward. My own heart hammered so hard it shook my ribcage. I wanted to kick that door open. I wanted to see her face, see every flicker of expression. But something inside me froze my foot mid-step. I realized how ridiculous I might look. An angry husband, fists clenched, pacing in the hall. The image of her leaning against that door, whispering to someone else, scalded my mind. That's when the laughter died away, replaced by low murmuring I couldn't make out. My lungs felt too tight for air. Trust is like a weapon. Maybe you keep it loaded in your heart, on a safety catch, so it'll protect the ones you care about. Or maybe it's pointed right at your own head, and you never see it until the trigger's already pulled. I'd let her hold that weapon for years, confident she'd never turn it on me. I was wrong. I heard the knob twist. The door opened a crack. My wife's eyes appeared in the dim light. "Michael," she said. Her voice was calm, just a breath above a whisper, as though my entire world wasn't crashing. She looked almost amused, or maybe that was just my reflection in her gaze. "Come out here," I said. "We need to talk." She didn't move. Instead, she glanced behind her shoulder, then pressed the door shut again, leaving me only the dull white paint as a reply. I wanted to roar at her. Instead, I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw pulsed with pain. There was a rasp of footsteps from inside. Another muffled voice, his voice, presumably. Then her laugh again, sharper this time. It shredded something in me. But I just stood there. The cold, creeping voice in my head told me to be calm. "This is humiliating," it whispered. "You're a grown man, and she's giggling at you." I swallowed that feeling. Didn't help much. A horn blared outside on the street. The noise came and went, leaving the house in thick silence. I became acutely aware of my own breathing, of a slight tremor in my hands. I wanted to break that door down, but something about her laughter stopped me. It was so casual, so confident. She probably expected me to snap, to throw something, to tear the place apart. Maybe, in a twisted sense, that was what she wanted. I turned and walked away. My body felt like lead, each step heavier than the last. I reached the front door and stepped onto the porch. The crisp evening air stung my face. Traffic hummed in the distance, headlights drifting past. But the quiet inside our house felt denser than any city night. It was the quiet of a marriage rotting from within. I paced back and forth on the porch, trying to gather my thoughts. How the hell did we get here? A question that had a million answers, day by day, year by year, argument by argument, all the silent resentments that stacked up behind forced smiles. And in the end, it was me, standing out in the cold, while she was inside with him. I remembered earlier that evening. She'd come home late, hair mussed, smelling of cheap cologne that wasn't mine. I'd picked up the kids from after-school activities, our son's basketball practice, our daughter's study group, without her usual text or call. She walked in like it was any other day. Maybe she gave me a distant kiss on the cheek. Maybe not. It all blurred together. I could still taste bitterness on my tongue, though. I re-entered the house. The bedroom door was still closed. I heard low voices again, but they were more subdued now. My wife's whisper was almost like a purr, and I could picture them. Her hair draped over his shoulder, her lips pressed against his ear. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might vomit. I forced myself to breathe through my nose. The floor creaked under my step. I stood in the hallway, listening. "Rebecca," I said again, voice hoarse. "Open the door." Silence. I placed my hand on the knob, gripped it until my knuckles went white. Then she spoke, voice muffled by the wood, Go away, Michael. She spoke so calmly, like I was a nuisance at the door rather than her husband. There was a second of rustling, a small gasp. My heart lurched with disgust, and a flicker of pain so intense it blurred my vision. I thought about the first time I'd met her, all the trust I'd so willingly handed over. She told me she wanted a stable life, a future she could believe in. And I gave it to her. That trust, that weapon, had been locked and loaded with every sacrifice I made for our family, every dream I set aside so the kids could have a better chance. Now it was pointed at me. She turned it into a joke, apparently. Or at least something she could test out with the next man who passed by. I stared at that handle, uncertain, half-hating myself. In that moment, the house felt stifling. I retreated a few steps, then turned into the living room. On the couch, my phone buzzed. I picked it up. A message from a coworker, something about tomorrow's meeting. Life outside this nightmare still went on, oblivious. I locked the screen. That's when I noticed the voice-activated speaker in the corner, one of those smart gadgets. A single tiny light glowed, indicating it was on standby. I remembered. Earlier, I'd set it to record some notes. Then I'd left for a while. Could it have picked up everything? The idea made my chest tighten. I walked over and tapped the device. The log read that it had recorded a snippet of audio. Recently. I pressed play. First, a faint static. Then I heard her. He doesn't even suspect how I'm using him, she whispered, her words broken by a breathy laugh. It's easier than I thought. Something about moaning, a hushed giggle. Then him. Some low, murmured endearment, a mention of my name. Another stifled laugh. And the recording ended. For an instant, I thought I'd lose the floor beneath my feet. My eyes stung, but I refused to cry. I refused. The humiliation threatened to swallow me whole. She said I didn't suspect. How naive did she think I was? My fists clenched. And still that black pit in my stomach whispered that I'd been fooling myself for years. It didn't matter if I'd suspected or not. Now I knew. The question was, what next? I replayed that snippet once more, letting each word stab deeper. He doesn't even suspect how I'm using him. My wife. The mother of our children. Laughing at my expense in my own home, behind a locked door with some other man. The cruelty of it made me want to break something. But I didn't. Instead, I exhaled slowly, pushed aside the swirling rage, and let a dark, bitter humor creep in. My life had become a bad drama, the kind men of my father's generation used to watch and scoff at. And here I was, starring in it. I walked to the bedroom door again and rested my forehead against the wood. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "do you hate me that much?" Another silence. Then, from somewhere inside, a strangled little laugh. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. Down the hall, I heard my son's voice. He was in his room, headphones on, talking to some friend online, oblivious to the storm unraveling only a few feet away. Our daughter was probably in her room too, maybe on her phone, maybe texting someone about typical teenage worries. They had no idea their mother's voice was floating through the living room speaker system minutes earlier, moaning with some stranger. I turned from the door and forced my feet to move. My mind locked onto practical steps, like a machine trying to salvage order from chaos. Banks, insurance, the will, trust funds for the kids, joint accounts. We'd built so much together, but now I was seeing it all as lines on a ledger that needed to be erased or rearranged. I went straight to my laptop. The hall was quiet now. Maybe they realized I was done pounding on the door, done playing that role. Good. Let them be comfortable. Let them think I'd retreated in defeat. But I started tapping keys, checking every shared financial link, every point of vulnerability. I wasn't going to smash plates or throw a tantrum. I'd do something that hurt more. I'd wipe out everything she took for granted. Her laughter echoed in my ears. That was the last push I needed. Our bank accounts, deleted my access, locked her out. Our joint insurance policies canceled. Our mortgage was half in my name, half in hers, but I initiated the steps to freeze my portion. The health insurance for the kids. That I kept. They weren't at fault. But everything else, from the lines of credit to the petty joint savings, I moved around or shut down. My breath came faster, my hands shook, but I kept going. If she was going to laugh at me, I'd remove every reason she had to cling to me financially. It felt methodical. A bit terrifying, how cold I was. My reflection in the dark screen showed a stiff face, eyes hollow. Some men in my place might be screaming for blood. Me? I wanted clarity. I wanted to stand on the scorched earth of our marriage, where no illusions remained. Maybe half an hour later, I heard movement behind me. The door to our bedroom opened with a click, then footsteps. I didn't turn. Let them do what they want. Then came a quiet conversation in the hall. I recognized her voice, and a deeper voice. They spoke in hushed tones. I caught a few words. He'll calm down. Should we go? No, he won't do anything. That last part made me grin, in a twisted sort of way. They thought I was harmless. They had no idea how a calm man could be more dangerous than a furious one. I stayed facing my laptop, tapping through final cancellations, forging digital papers to sever our combined life. My hand hovered over a final document, the dissolution of all our shared property. I'd made it months earlier when times were tense, never thinking I'd actually use it. But I had it. Now, I typed in today's date. This was the blow. No meltdown, no primal scream, just the final stroke of a pen. Or in this case, a digital signature. I heard them cross the living room. She said something like, "Michael, we'll talk in the morning. Try to get some rest." That was the voice I used to love. Soft, caring. Now it felt condescending, as if I were a child having a tantrum. The black humor inside me swelled again. She was telling me to rest while her lover stood behind her, fiddling with his jacket zipper, eyes shifting. Sure, I managed. Get out. I didn't even look over my shoulder. They left. The front door clicked shut. The house sank into an even heavier quiet. I closed the laptop. The sense of emptiness was almost unbearable, but I forced myself to breathe. She was gone with him. Our kids, how would they react if they realized she wasn't spending the night at home? Would they notice? My shoulders slumped. The humiliation felt like it was coursing through my veins. I wondered if I should smash that speaker in the corner, but I decided not to. Let it stand as a witness. Tomorrow, or whenever the time came, I could replay that snippet if ever I felt doubts. She'd said it plainly. He doesn't even suspect how I'm using him. And now I did suspect, or rather I knew. I tried to sleep on the couch that night, but my mind wouldn't quiet. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured them together, her nails raking down his back, her face twisted in pleasure, the mocking arch of her eyebrow, if she pictured me in that moment. The bed upstairs was empty except for my pride. Eventually, I dozed off. The city hum outside seemed to dim. The house was like a tomb, and I was trapped in it. I woke before dawn, stiff and sore. I found a note on the kitchen table, scrawled in her handwriting. Left early. We'll talk tonight. That was it. So she'd come back eventually. Great. I tossed the note in the trash, brewed coffee, and stared at the empty seat she used to occupy. Trust is an odd thing. You armor up your life with it, thinking you're safe. Then you find out the armor has a seam wide enough for a knife, or maybe you discover that you handed someone else the keys to it, and they jammed that weapon right through your chest. I sipped my coffee, a bitter grin tugging at my mouth. She'd used my trust to shield herself. She never thought I'd see the day, or the man, or the smirking betrayal. But I saw him, all right. And she'd see me, just not the version of me she expected. I left for work. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrors. A tired man with short dark hair touched by gray. lines at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting at spreadsheets, or maybe from carrying too many burdens. I wiped a hand over my jaw, feeling stubble. I closed my eyes. When I arrived at the office, my coworkers barely noticed anything. I was always reserved, an ISTJ type, if a label helps. I didn't confide in them. But my boss shot me a glance when she saw me spacing out. She asked, "Everything okay?" I nodded stiffly. I handled the day's tasks on autopilot, numbers swimming in front of my eyes. Then I left a bit early, ignoring the sideways looks. I drove home in a numb daze. Our living room lights were on. I could see them through the window. The kids were there, probably finishing dinner. The line between fatherly duty and personal heartbreak felt razor thin. So I steeled myself. Inside, the kids greeted me. They looked confused, anxious. "Where's Mom?" I asked. Our daughter shrugged. "She just went out again," she said. I nodded. I was about to ask if they'd eaten when she spoke again. "Dad, is something wrong between you two?" She looked at me with wide, worried eyes. My son hovered behind her, trying to look indifferent, but clearly sensing the tension. I couldn't bring myself to tell them. "Not yet. We're just dealing with some stuff," I said, patting them on the shoulders. "Go to your homework, please." They obeyed. I sat in the kitchen and realized I couldn't bear the smell of food. My stomach churned. The clock on the wall ticked away each second. By 10 at night, she still hadn't returned. I settled on the couch again, wanting to stay within earshot of the front door. She came in around midnight, and with her, I picked up the lingering trace of men's cologne that made my teeth clench. I didn't speak. She passed me in the dim light, heading for the bedroom. She didn't say a word either. It was as if I didn't exist. The next few days blurred into a pattern that felt both surreal and agonizing. She didn't hide her affair. She rarely slept here, but sometimes she'd show up for the kids or to pick up clothes. She'd avoid me as much as possible, or talk to me like we were distant roommates. Meanwhile, I quietly dismantled our shared finances and prepared the dissolution papers. I said nothing about it to her. The tension between us built with each passing hour. One night, though, it came to a head. She came in late, found me in the living room, and paused. I saw her shifting from foot to foot. "We should talk," she said, hugging her coat around her. "Maybe tomorrow." I studied her face. She still looked beautiful to me, even now. A part of me hated that. A part of me wanted to pull her close, despite everything. But that weapon, trust, had already fired. There was no going back. So I said, "Fine. Tomorrow. Bring your friend if you like." "I don't mind." My voice tricked with sarcasm. She frowned, then glided off to the bedroom. I heard her close the door softly, as if refusing to let me have one final dramatic slam. In the morning, I confronted her. The kids were at school. I cornered her in the kitchen, blocking her path to the exit. "What are you doing?" I asked plainly. "Do you want a divorce?" Because if she did, I had the documents ready. She looked away, letting out a short, dry laugh. "Michael, it's not that simple," she said. "I just need excitement. Something new. We've been stuck." She forced a note of pity into her tone, as though I was partly to blame for her stepping out behind my back. "And that's your excuse?" I said, voice cold. She shrugged, adjusting the purse strap on her shoulder. Her ring finger looked bare. I noticed she'd taken off the wedding band. My stomach knotted. She sighed. "I don't want to fight anymore, or talk about it. Let's just keep it civil, for the kids' sake." I stared at her. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. A twisted little grin. "Civil. For the kids. Right." Inside, I felt something break, or maybe calcify. A sense that the man I'd been was gone. She left. I realized then that anything resembling love from her side was dead. Still, I felt something for her. Even after all this, a piece of me wanted to rescue the woman I remembered. But she was lost behind cruelty and her new fling. That old version might never return. That same week, I found the kids acting strangely around me, whispering that Mom is upset. I overheard them tell her I was a monster, that I was giving her the silent treatment, that I'd canceled some of our joint bills. "He's punishing you," I heard our daughter say, voice trembling with teenage indignation. Meanwhile, the love of my life stood there, letting them see me as the villain. Something inside me cracked wide open. A father's heartbreak, deeper than anything else. The kids I'd sacrificed for. The kids I loved more than my own life. Now they saw me as the bad guy. Blood may be thicker than water, but apparently betrayal can be thicker than blood. In that hush of realization, I decided to finalize the dissolution. If they all believed I was a monster, then fine. I'd become that. I called a lawyer, e-signed documents. The kids confronted me, demanding to know why I was taking away everything from Mom. She looked at me with tearful eyes. Tears I doubted were genuine. She probably told them a twisted version of events. The fact that she was stepping out with another man never came up. All that was visible was me, the father, methodically destroying the stability of our home. My daughter screamed at me. "She's suffering, and you don't even care." My son glared as if I'd personally betrayed him. That was the ultimate absurdity, and the black humor in me bubbled up. I almost laughed. She was the one who'd moaned to her lover about using me, but in their eyes, I'd become the callous monster. I let them believe it, said nothing in my defense. What was the point? They'd chosen her side. Maybe I deserved it, or maybe that was just the shape of the wound. This was the final stage of humiliation. A few weeks later, I'd moved out. Or, more accurately, I forced the sale of the house, parted ways with that entire life. Our kids refused to speak to me. She moved in with her lover, from what I gathered. The documents were finalized with ruthless efficiency. I left the joint accounts bone dry. I kept a separate policy for the children's future, but everything else was severed from her. I changed addresses, found a small condo near my workplace. I kept one folder, the dissolution papers. That and my rage were all I had left of our marriage. Time passed. I sank into a routine. I threw myself into work, became a machine that woke up at 5 in the morning, did a quick workout, ate, and then lived behind a spreadsheet until the sun went down. I made no contact with the kids, not after their final condemnation. They'd sided with her, so be it. She was free now, presumably living out her excitement with that other man. I told no one about the betrayal. Some nights, I found myself replaying that snippet on the speaker. "He doesn't even suspect how I'm using him." That line was burned into my brain. I'd let it fill my dreams, fueling a cold anger that kept me upright. Trust as a weapon, used with surgical cruelty. The best defense was to become unbreakable. If that meant turning my heart to stone, so be it. 7 years slid by like that. The kids had grown. I heard rumors. My son went off to college. My daughter followed soon after. They stayed in contact with their mother, occasionally texting me with stiff pleasantries, but otherwise ignoring me. We were strangers, ironically bound by DNA. I shaped my life into something purely functional. My condo was neat, bare, with minimal furniture. I wore the same style of clothes every day. My hair had more gray. My face had deeper lines. Each morning, I'd log a video entry, something I started doing in the months after the separation. A habit, maybe, to talk to myself. Video day 103, I'd say, or 200 or 500. I rarely watched them. It was a private record of my transformation from a hopeful husband into a man carved from granite. On day 2384, I sat in the same condo, sipping tea. I thought about that old life, the humiliation, the rage. I rarely let myself dwell on it, but that day I felt a twinge. Then there was a knock at the door. My heart pounded. I rarely had visitors. I set down my cup and walked to open it. She stood there, Rebecca, Except she looked so different. Her hair dull and streaked with gray, shoulders slumped, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Beside her, our daughter, now a young adult, hesitant. The tension was suffocating. I barely recognized the woman I once loved. That old memory of her mocking laugh twisted inside me. She whispered my name. Michael. I said nothing at first, just stared at the shell of who she'd become. Her voice trembled as she explained. He left me. A few years ago. Things fell apart. She tried to meet my eyes, but I gave her no help. Our daughter spoke next, tears glistening. Dad, we're sorry. We were so blinded back then. She kept glancing at her mother. We didn't know. We believed what Mom told us, that you'd abandoned her. I remained silent. For a moment, I might have felt pity, but mostly I felt a dull ache, like an old scar. The father in me wanted to comfort the child I'd lost to her mother's manipulations, but the man I'd become recognized that some wounds never truly heal. Rebecca reached out a trembling hand. I was wrong, she said, voice cracking. Everything. I see it now. I've paid for it. I lost everything. I lost you. I lost my peace. And the kids, well, they saw the truth eventually. She swallowed, tears shining at the corners of her eyes. He just vanished one night. Took my money, left me in debt. I need help, Michael. 7 years ago, I might have thrown myself at her feet, let the old love override my pride. But that man was dead. I gave her a long, cold stare. My daughter stepped forward, her face anguished. Please, Dad, I don't want to see her like this. She has no one left. I let out a soft breath. The old me might have roared, demanded apologies, inflicted retribution. Instead, I simply stepped aside. They walked into my neat living room, overshadowed by the knowledge of what they'd done. She sank onto the sofa, looking frail, while my daughter hovered nearby, eyes darting between us like a frightened animal. I poured more tea. It was quiet, except for the faint hum of traffic through the closed window. She sipped slowly, her hand shaking so badly, the cup rattled against the saucer. Neither of us spoke. I felt no need to fill the silence. Eventually, she said, "How have you been?" A pathetic attempt at small talk. I shrugged, meeting her gaze with dispassion. "Fine," I said. "Been working. Paying bills. Living." There was a bitterness in my tone, but also a calm acceptance. She set the cup down. "I know you probably hate me," she murmured, voice thick, "but I wanted you to know how sorry I am. For everything. For how I hurt you." I tilted my head, letting a wry smile curl my lips. "Hate you," I repeated. "No. I just don't care anymore. That's worse, if you think about it." I saw how the word stung. I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Then came an odd sense of pity. She was broken. Something in me still remembered her warmth, that first spark. But trust, once used as a weapon, never regains its innocence. My daughter pressed her hands together. "Dad, I was stupid and young. Mom told us you'd cut her off financially out of pure spite." She said, "Well, she never mentioned the affair." The girl paused, eyes brimming with regret. "I hated you for it." I sighed, feeling the weight of all those lost years. "I understand," I said. "You believed your mother. That's normal. Blood is just biology. Family is something else." I looked at her, my tone gentler than I expected. "I'm sorry you had to see any of this." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Rebecca sat motionless, eyes locked on her trembling hands. "I was so arrogant," she muttered. "I was sure I could have everything. The safety you gave me, and the thrill he gave me. I guess I never thought how it would end." There was no reason for me to spare her feelings now. "Well, here we are," I said, my voice echoing a final note of closure. She blinked, tears sliding down her lined cheeks. We spent an hour together. She tried to explain her regrets, said she understood I'd want nothing to do with her. My daughter apologized repeatedly, her voice cracking with sorrow. And me? I listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally letting a dark quip slip out. Black humor had become my shield. At least you didn't break the speaker, I joked at one point, referencing the device that had recorded her betrayal. She cringed, remembering exactly what it had caught. Eventually they left. I didn't promise anything. My daughter hugged me. I returned it stiffly, not because I didn't love her, but because it felt so unfamiliar now. She whispered that she wanted to see me again, to rebuild. I told her, we'll see. I didn't want to lie, and say it would be easy. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone once more. That evening, I sat in my living room, started my video log. I was older now, no illusions about that. Lines in my face, hair peppered with gray. Day 2384. I murmured into the camera. Another day, another crack. Years ago, I'd said, one day, one crack. Now, my heart had been split so many times it was impossible to track. Still, I felt a weight lift from me, just a little. Maybe it was the final confirmation that I was right all along. Maybe it was seeing how life had punished her, or maybe it was the first step to letting go. I sipped my tea and made a half smile at my own reflection. I thought about how many times men in my position get overshadowed by anger, only to realize the emptiness never leaves. Sometimes, ironically, the acceptance of betrayal is the last key to finding a new sense of self. That weapon, trust, was still battered and lying on the floor, but at least I knew where it stood. The city lights outside glimmered. Cars rumbled by. In the background, my phone beeped with a notification. I ignored it. My life had become shockingly simple. No attachments, no illusions. I wondered how many people out there, maybe on dating apps, maybe in the real world, typed, looking for a man like him, but before he turned into what he is now. Because I knew, once upon a time, I was a decent man, full of hope. Now I was cold steel. Some might still desire that earlier version, the one who believed in love without caution. But that man no longer existed. I ended my recording for the day, feeling no triumph, no heartbreak, just a quiet calm. Maybe with time, I'd reconnect with my children, forge something new, or maybe we'd remain estranged. As for her, she came too late. Life already dealt her the final blow. I wasn't interested in punishing her further. She was doing that to herself. I put down my phone and rubbed my eyes. The house was silent aside from the faint buzz of electricity through the walls. My mouth twisted into a bitter grin, remembering the countless nights I used to lie awake, seething, dreaming of vengeance. I realized that revenge had come, just not in the shape I expected. Some men wait for a spectacular retribution, but sometimes life itself finishes the job. I carried my teacup to the kitchen, rinsed it out. I turned off the lights and sat there in the darkness for a while, letting the hum of the fridge fill my ears. It was almost comforting, that subtle white noise. Then I said aloud, to nobody, I loved her, even after it all. Hearing my own voice startled me for a second. But it was true. Part of me, deep down, still loved the memory of the woman she once was, even though she turned that trust against me. I let out a dry chuckle. This was my life now. A middle-aged man who'd found the bottom of betrayal and come out the other side. Maybe that was enough. I got up, walked through the condo, switched off the last lamp. In the darkness, I saw the faint reflection of myself in the window. A man change. A man who'd carried heartbreak for so long it became second nature. And, surprisingly, I felt no urge to smash the reflection. Maybe I'd made my peace, or maybe I was just too tired to fight. Tomorrow, the sun would rise, and I'd continue living. That was the punchline of it all. After the worst storms, life goes on. If there was any small mercy, it was that the cold inside me had grown calm. The humiliations, the heartbreak, those were deep scars, but scars eventually stopped bleeding. I pictured her eyes from earlier today, hollow, searching for some sign of forgiveness. Did she deserve it? Was it even mine to give? I shrugged to the empty room. Trust is a weapon. She used it on me once, but she forgot that I knew how it felt to be shot by it. Maybe that was the difference now. I recognized the barrel, the trigger, the bullet. I wouldn't let it wound me again. If she wanted redemption, she'd have to carry that burden herself. At last, I retreated to my bedroom, pulling off my clothes with mechanical efficiency. It was just another day after all. A day that ended in quiet revelations rather than explosive fury. I slipped under the covers, stared at the ceiling, and smiled a little at the thought of how far I'd come. 7 years ago, I was a man on the brink. Now, I was simply me, hardened, cynical, but alive. Somewhere, I imagined her looking at an empty bank account, an empty bed, a regretful life. That was that. And as I closed my eyes, I thought about how, maybe, in 1,000 Tinder profiles across the city, women wrote lines about wanting a real man, or someone honest and stable. Maybe some of them had read stories about men like me, men who'd once been pillars of trust, who got shattered, who left everything behind. Maybe they fantasized about saving me from the pain. Or maybe they just wanted a man who would never suspect how he was being used. Until it was too late. I drifted off, letting the black humor swirl around. The next day would be day 2385, another notch in the timeline of a life spent rebuilding. My last conscious thought was that, strange as it sounded, I felt more at peace in that moment than I'd felt in years, because it was over. The illusions, the heartbreak, the twisted hopes, all that remained was the steady, unromantic truth. I survived. And that, in its own harsh way, was enough.